Taco Cast. I'm Crystal.
I'm Will.
You're the audience.
Welcome. So today we have been asked, and it's a subject that we've both talked about on and off again, off of this podcast. Today we're going to be talking about autism and the spectrum disorder in itself, and either you agree with that it's a disorder or not, but we're going to talk about the entire spectrum of it all. And so let's first, what would you like to talk about first on this actual subject? Would you like to give a definition of what autism is to those who may not know?
The definition for autism is going to change, or has changed. Um, Autism is considered a spectrum disorder, encompasses a variety of different neurological types that originally were classified individually. You sometimes hear people refer to themselves as Aspies, Asperger's syndrome, stuff like that. Those used to be separate and considered separate things. They are now all under autism spectrum. As Bill and I were discussing just a little bit before we started filming, uh, some people don't like to use the term disorder. Um, one of the ways I like to explain it is we almost all have the same hardware, but some of us are just running different software. So it's not a disorder per se. Um, for a lot of people, it's just a different way of looking at the world and a different way of processing the information that you're getting. Um, there are some people with autism who are, I'm not sure what the terminology is at this point. People often refer to them, I think, as low functioning. I don't know that that's a really good descriptor, but people who don't, their ability to interact with the world is severely limited. Um, and a lot of people would argue that those people, it is a disorder. Because their ability to interact and function is limited.
Does it? All right, I hate to interrupt you,
No,
but
no,
I
that's
just want
fine.
I want to know, make sure I get this absolutely clear. So, obviously, there's a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lower end, and
Mm-hmm.
then there's the higher end.
Yes.
Okay, now in the case that I was recently talking about on my other channel, Lori Vallows,
Mm-hmm.
her son JJ Vallows has autism, and according to his aunt, his niece, and a lady who used to work with him at his private school in Arizona, he has a he's very high functioning, all right, kid, but his social skills and development are extremely limited. So they are the school and the representative from the school and the aunt and his grandmother too. They all wanted to describe JJ as if he was being to be approached by a stranger, he would more likely run from that stranger than be able to communicate with them. But with people he knows and he is familiar with, he is able to interact with them, and he's just like a normal average kid, 7-year-old. He's 7 years old. So, but I said in several videos on this because I've done over 16 total now at this point. Oh, I'm gonna
Dang,
find
man.
these kids, or I'm gonna make sure that lady sits in jail for the rest of her damn life, and everybody knows about it. But in the entire series, I've mentioned a couple of times that JJ was on the higher spectrum disorder because that's how the school didn't want to classify him there. They just said that his social skills are really limited, but and unless he knows who you are, and then there's like a scale slides up and down for and so is that right to be able to say things like that? Like this kid is lower functioning, this kid is higher, or I don't. How do what would be the correct way to describe somebody, with autism? Do you just say, this is JJ, or this is Tim, or this is Bob, or Sarah, or Tim, or whatever? Or do you just say, look, this, my son is, and he has autism. He is on the upper end or the lower end. Is that something how somebody would describe someone with autism?
I think that's going to depend on who you're talking to and the purpose of the communication. If you're talking between clinical providers, they're going to use different language than person to person, just on the street.
The teacher, if you listen to her and how she describes JJ, I had to sit there and rewind and in a loop and actually listen to what she was saying, and then copy and paste it into Google just to try to figure out what she was talking about. Because it didn't sound like English to me, because she was talking, throwing out numbers and everything else on different things, and I was just like, I had no idea of what she was talking about. But go ahead.
Yeah. So how you're going to refer is going to depend on the context in which you're talking, the information that you're trying to portray. A lot of people that I've been speaking to prefer it depends on where you're at. Some people prefer language that what's a concise way to describe it? Basically language that doesn't make the autism the focus of the person that you're talking to, because autism is just a part of who that person is. That being said, it's in some ways is an integral part of who that person is, which is one of the reasons why a lot of people have issues with autism cures, because autism being an integral part of a person's personality, if you remove that, they're not the same person.
Okay, I completely understand that and agree with you there. That is not who they are. It is something that it's part of them, but it does not. It's not the overwhelming of who the person is.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you there. But when from my side, trying to explain to people about JJ in the series of videos that I was doing, I needed to make sure that I was asking the world to be on the lookout for these two missing children, and that I felt an urge, and I felt required. If you might use that correctly, if I'm using that correctly, I felt required to alert people who may see him. And I pinpointed different places on the map. Okay, there have been a lot of sightings in these areas. All right, and I gave a hypothesis about where I think she may have hidden him. Completely off the grid, which would fit with his autism because he wouldn't have stimulation, sensory stimulation. I mean, and stuff like that. So if she hid him off the grid. He would not be somewhere where a 17-year-old needs that sensory, stimulation, who doesn't have autism. I mean, and yes, I know it's bad to judge to like that, and I know that his sister Tylee really loved him, and still does love him wherever he is. But I think that she took him and put him someplace where there wouldn't be any sensory stimulation. Like, she's not going to hide him in downtown Chicago. She's going to hide him on a farm, in the middle of freaking nowhere, or in a commune somewhere. That's easier to hide him that way than it is to put him in Chicago, where he would absolutely lose it because he doesn't have anybody there. So, but that's a completely different story. Sticking with the autism, though. So they're functioning, lower functioning, and then higher functioning individuals on the actual scale itself. What causes autism? Do vaccines cause autism?
No.
No, they don't. Vaccines do not cause autism. No.
That's,
But go ahead. What?
Um, no one is 100% certain yet. Currently, there's a lot of things that correlate to autism, um, to varying degrees of strength. The best guess at this point in time is that uh, it is a combination of genetics and environmental influences, mostly genetic. What that is, exactly where that is, they're not 100% sure yet. A lot of people, so humans are actually amazingly environmentally reactive. Epigenetics is, in my opinion, still in its infancy, but a large amount of human gene expression changes based on the environment that you're in. So you you go to an environment and you encounter X environmental stressors, food and weather,
Uh-huh.
whatever, and your children, because of your exposure to this, will be more hardy to that environment. And humans are this. This is an amazing adaptive trait that we have, and
So my children are would be adept to go to war in the desert.
we didn't spend that much time there. We're talking long-term exposure
Oh,
here,
long term. Oh, okay. All right. Long term.
but maybe not.
All right.
I mean, maybe it doesn't have to be long-term. These things aren't necessarily overt. Lots of times they are fairly subtle. Anyway, that being said, there's an argument. How much strength it has is up for debate. Um, that autism is an adaptive trait. Now, the fact that some people with autism can't function that well in society, you know, that makes you wonder, well, what is this an adaptive trait to if some people that have this can't function? But
Okay.
there are other human traits that are like that. Sickle cell trait, uh, in its extreme, if you have two alleles for sickle cell, you can develop sickle cell anemia, which makes it difficult for you to function because your blood cells can't hold a lot of oxygen. But sickle cell trait is adaptive because it protects you from parasites. So there are other examples of adaptive traits that sometimes have downsides in extremes. So it's not all that far fetched.
So do people with autism live long lives?
Yeah, many do.
So they live normal, long,
Mhm.
healthy lives? Are they, people with autism, are they um, prone to other diseases?
I have read some research that suggests yes. Um, However, the research that I read was not all that conclusive. Lots of times when you're reading research that has correlations, you have to take into account other factors, such as healthcare and barriers to healthcare. And people with autism do experience barriers to healthcare sometimes.
So, the next question I have is we've established that they live long lives just like everybody else, normal lives like everybody else. Is there anything else that they're exposed to? Do they do they marry? Do they I there's a lot of we have to understand there's a lot of people out there who don't understand necessarily what autism is, and there are a lot of people out there who do get autism and Down syndrome confused when you're talking about children with disabilities, and adults with disabilities. So, and I feel sorry for them that they do that. They confuse the two. I've tried to research and figure out why they are confusing the two. I mean, they're completely different.
They are.
But
Children with Down syndrome can have autism. They Down syndrome is comorbid with a number of things. Autism is one of them. You can have Down syndrome and have autism. Down syndrome, it results from it's a trisomy disorder, not really a disease. It's a trisomy disorder where rather than getting one copy of genes from your parent, your dad, and one copy of genes from your mother, and then you've got two, somehow you wind up with three on there. Typically what happens is when those cells are dividing, you should get one and one, and then instead of going with this one of them's like, nope, I'm going to take them both, and then that egg gets used.
Wow.
Yeah.
So if two children grow up, they're adults, and they both have autism, and they have children themselves, will their children then be autistic?
Autism does have a pretty strong genetic component, so chances are yes.
Okay. So do you want to tackle some myths and misconceptions next?
Yes.
Or is there something else that you'd like to share before we do so?
Don't feed your autistic kids bleach. Don't do that. Don't. There's a lot of myths as we're going into this segment surrounding autism, and you're going to read a lot of stuff on the internet, and a lot of it is wrong.
Yeah. And whatever you do, don't listen to Jenny McCarthy. Why anybody would listen to, a has-been actress, I have no idea. And she has put out a plethora of misinformation and a lot of information that will get a lot of people seriously hurt if they follow it and what her foundation has put out about autism and other birth defects and everything else. And when I'm not even talking about that, all the stupid things that she has said and gone on to say about vaccines. I'm talking about she has gone past the vaccine, whacking up, and then went farther. So.
But is she a moon truther?
Oh, probably. Who knows? Okay, myths and misconceptions about autism. Autism is relatively new. Is autism relatively new?
No, it's not. Autism has been around for a very, very long time. Our diagnostic criteria have gotten better. And really that's about it. Our ability to recognize autism when it presents is better.
According to the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, the first official writing and documentation of the first person with autism was in 1799. All right, next one. Autism is a mental health disorder. Maybe we can just medicate them out of autism. Or give them enough psychotherapy and they won't have autism.
Again...
Electroshock?
No.
No.
Again, like I said
again?
earlier, autism is just running different software. It's not a... The problem, in my opinion, is that society isn't really set up to make it easy for autistic people to navigate. It's not an issue with autistic people. It's an issue with society as a whole being able to make space for them to be themselves.
According to the CDC's description, autism they have abnormalities in the brain structure in neurotransmitter levels. So I guess software. So they just put it in a more technical way than you broke it down there. Next is individuals with autism have mental disabilities.
They can, but not necessarily.
Okay, I guess that's short and sweet. Next one. Autism is caused by vaccines. No, it's not.
One of the reasons why this myth gains strength is because autism will not be diagnosed in children under a certain age. Providers may see signs and they may strongly suspect that the child is autistic, even very young, but they will not diagnose it until the child is older. part of the reason for that is because it's hard to tell in children, because all children develop at a different rate, and you have to get past those major developmental hurdles before you can be more certain. Because of that, most diagnosis of autism doesn't happen until after a significant portion of vaccines have been administered. That does not mean those signs were not there prior. It just means that the diagnostic criteria, that the children will not be diagnosed until past that age. I would also like to note, while we're on this point, that Wakefield and the redacted paper that he published, he was attempting to market his own version of the vaccine, and he was specifically trying to cast shade on one vaccine manufacturer. So that was dirty pool trying to sell his own stuff.
Didn't he lose his medical license?
He did, in fact.
And he went to jail too, didn't he?
Yes, and a lot of people say that that's a cover-up for the vaccine paper, but actually what a lot of people don't realize
and
is...
the American Medical Association and several others in Europe have completely disowned him, and have reached out and released their own papers countless times and said, look, this guy was just an idiot.
And he was doing experiments on children that were not authorized and considered highly unethical.
Yeah.
That is why he lost his license. Not because of the paper, because you don't go to your kid's birthday party and do experiments on kids that are there, which is something Wakefield did.
He did. Yeah. All very well documented, and he admitted to it. That's the best part. All right, next one is autism is caused by what they refer to as refrigerator mothers.
That's an old myth.
From the 1950s.
Yes, but that is a strong myth that autism is caused because your mom didn't give you enough hugs.
Distant and cold emotionally to the child.
Now, there is some speculation that part of the reason why this myth came about is because autism does appear to have a strong genetic component, and autistic people do occasionally struggle with social cues and expressing themselves. There is some speculation that that myth came about because autistic children had autistic mothers who may have had difficulty expressing themselves in social situations. But it's not true. And I think it's well past time that we as a society stop blaming mothers for literally everything that goes on in someone's life.
All right. Good information. So next myth is those with autism have savant abilities.
Like everybody else, with or without autism, some people do and some people don't. Some people are just really damn good at a couple of things, and some people just are fair to middling.
Yep, this is true. I can't do a lot of things in this world, but some things I can do damn well. All right, next one. Individuals with autism do not feel love and are unable to make meaningful long-term relationships.
Yeah, that's not true. People with autism have the same range of human emotion that everybody else does. They do have difficulty expressing it sometimes, knowing what is appropriate expression for society.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. There's some kids out there, some are autistic and some aren't, that just want to give everybody hugs. That is not generally considered socially acceptable, but damn it, maybe it should be.
Yeah. And on the opposite side of it, there are children with autism and those without who just want to make everybody's life miserable.
And there are people with autism who aren't that interested in social interaction, and that's okay too.
I know people without autism who are not into going out into social situations. They would just rather people call them homebodies or bookworms or whatever you want to call them. Everybody comes up with a different term and for it. But I mean, there are people that I know who just don't really have a lot of curiosity. Well, it's not that they don't have curiosity; they just don't feel the need to interact with a lot of people in this world. They have maybe one or two really close friends, and that's it. That's all they really need.
Do you need more? No.
I do. All right, next. Those with autism are cold and lack empathy.
Sometimes it can appear that way. And some of the conversations I've had with people who are in relationships with autistic people is a relationship stressor. That people who are used to expressing affection one way and they're with somebody who has difficulties expressing affection, you can begin to think that your partner is not affectionate. And it can be a stressor to a relationship. But acknowledging that and working through that, people can overcome it. They're just as affectionate as other people. Again, it's just sometimes they have difficulties expressing that in a way that the rest of society recognizes. Doesn't mean they're not affectionate. It's just how they express it is different.
True. Next one. People with autism have no sense of humor. I have no idea where this one came from.
Where did that come from?
Well, it's on the CDC, so that's the next one on the list.
No, that's not.
I've never heard that, and I know people who are autistic and can tell some pretty damn funny jokes.
You know, the only thing I could think where this myth might have arisen from, and this is just from, again, personal conversations I've had with people, is that several of the autistic people I know just don't have time for stupid ass jokes. They're not about the knock knock jokes or your joke has to be pretty high up or they just don't have time for it. Maybe that's a thing, but again, I don't think that that's exclusive to autistic people. I think a lot of people, bring your A material or go home.
All right. Autism can be cured. Is the last one on the list.
No. Autism cannot be cured. It's...
Are you sure?
Yes.
Jenny McCarthy says if you just give your child 2,900 milligrams of vitamin C every day religiously.
And you know what? Take your vitamins. Vitamins are good for everybody. To a certain point, again, it's not a cure-all. You're not going to live forever.
Until the toxic levels.
Yeah. High
down
doses
your
of vitamin C will give you the trots. So be really careful with that. But as long as you're not in toxic doses, you're not going to hurt yourself with a vitamin. It's also not going to cure anything. Again, you're just, autistic people are just running different software. It's not really anything that needs to be cured. For people who have loved ones who have extreme difficulties functioning in society, some kids hurt themselves, and stuff like that. I can definitely understand why you would want something, anything, to help your kid. I mean, because everybody wants their loved ones to do well and to be happy, and you're definitely not happy if you're harming yourself. But again, that's more. It's not something that we can cure. Now there are things that we can do for some people to help them get along in society better. But again, that comes back to my previous statement about society isn't structured to allow people to be their genuine selves. So is that really a cure per se when you're just forcing somebody into a box that they're not really going to blossom in?
True. All right. So we went through the myths and everything else here for myths and misconceptions about autism. Rapid fire time.
Ooh, it's rapid fire time.
Rapid fire time. Does Taco Bell cause autism?
What?
Does Taco Bell cause autism? Eating Taco Bell.
Okay, now look, a 7-layer burrito will cause a lot of things, but autism isn't one of them.
You're supposed to answer these rapidly.
Oh, sorry.
That's why it's rapid fire.
Okay, fine. No.
Okay, good. Next. How many autistic children do you have?
One.
Why do you care about autism?
I, I, you can't rapid fire answer a question like that. Stop it.
They're blank.
He's a little booger.
The reason why we're talking about autism today is because our son is autistic. He is on the spectrum level. Is there a number to it? No, and that we don't care. You know, we love him just as much as we love our daughter, and we're gonna love him, and he's special to us, and he is our miracle baby already. And now we just get to, you know, for the questions that we went through today and that we answered, it blows our minds in on so many different levels. Especially, children with autism are not affectionate. They don't feel emotions. When it's just a complete crap, because our son, he feels anger, he feels love, he has every possible emotion out there as a 3-year-old, and he is smart. He is very with it. When he wants to interact with other children, he does. When he doesn't, he just doesn't want to. And we understand that it's a spectrum disorder, and he has abilities that are here on some levels, and then he has deficits in others. And we're working, around we have him in speech therapy. He has him in school. We work with him at home. We're trying to give him the best of everything that we can to make him as close to equal to his peers. But we understand at the same time that he's always going to have a struggle. And that's a struggle that we have committed to be there with him for. And I really feel sorry for anybody out there who has to go through it alone. Raising a child is not easy. Raising a child with special needs is not easy at all, and but autism, it's real. Every one of them, our son, your child can go on to live a full, fruitful life and be independent later on. They don't have to live in a group home. They don't have, all these other things that people think about them. Sure, they're going to have setbacks. I have a 22-year-old daughter in the house who doesn't have autism, and she has setbacks in life. And things get in her way, and she has a full range of emotions just like my son does. And she has maybe one or two friends. And my son has one or two friends. So, what would you like to add?
That was pretty good, babe. That was a good summation. Yeah. I think actually I do want to touch on the one thing that you mentioned, a lot of people have this misconception. We talked about a little bit there that people with autism don't show emotion. And just because they express it differently doesn't mean they don't have it. And if you take anything away from this, I want you to take away that sometimes we just need a little bit of patience and grace for the people that we're talking to, and to put ourselves in their shoes. And maybe don't think the worst of somebody if you're not getting the emotional response that you would expect from them. Give them a little bit of time and give them the benefit of the doubt.
I think the world would be a heck of a lot better place if we all just gave each other a little bit more time. If we just closed our mouths and opened our ears and listened to each other more, and had empathy into what may have brought that other person to the point where they are when you're interacting with them. Think about their backstory. Everybody has a story in this world. We all come from somewhere, and everything that we do in this world affects us and will affect us in the future of who we are and who we become. And in today's society, we're quick to to judge. People want to judge me on the internet, or you on the internet, or everybody else. And the keyboard warriors will send death threats. For what? Because I make a video, and I talk about a subject that they don't agree with because they already have their predetermined outcome of what the truth is. And when it comes to interacting with people who have maybe either a learning disability or they have a mental health issue, we need to learn to give a little bit more room. Understand, open up your heart and your mind, and consider where these people that you're interacting with on a daily basis, or you may just interact with them maybe just for that split minute. That person who is acting a little bit weird as you're going into the store, or maybe they're just standing there nice and quietly, in a place where everybody else is running them around and screaming their heads off, but that one person's calm. You don't know what the backstory is there, so it's important.
Yeah. Maybe it's time that we as society, rather than expecting other people to adapt to us, maybe it's time for society to make room for other people.
Yes. Yeah,
Anyways,
I hate to think where the world is going if we just keep on this road where we don't we don't um, appreciate the differences in the individuals who are around us. I mean, I appreciate the differences in everybody who I interact with, in their story and who they are and where they come from and what they can not only give to my community, but what they have as a person. You know, I don't probably fumbling words there on that, but ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for joining us today. I hope you learned something about autism, and I hope for those out there who have children, or maybe you're autistic yourself. I welcome you to the community and thank you for joining us. Is there anything you'd like to add?
have a great evening.
Bye.